"You're not going to faint, are you?" he teased, eyes half-lidded. Grace didn't answer. Silently, she turned on the shower and helped him up with effort. His muscles trembled under her hand. Every touch, though clinical, felt charged with electricity. When the hot water poured over him, Logan let out a sigh that made her shiver. This wasn't right. She was just the housekeeper. And he was the broken millionaire who, for a moment, seemed less arrogant and more human. Welcome to Love Above All, Passion and Power Stories. Before we begin this story, I have a challenge for you. If you enjoy the first few minutes, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. She was hired only to clean the house, but ended up touching the soul of a broken man, trapped in a dark past and a cruel inheritance. When love rises from wounds, contracts and betrayal, what matters more, protecting your heart or risking everything for something real? Get ready for an intense story of redemption, passion, and life-changing choices. Let's begin. Rain pounded hard on the hood of the old car as Grace Sullivan stared at the massive mansion surrounded by pines, nestled off a dirt road, barely recognized by the GPS. There was no intercom, no doorbell, just an iron gate with the crest of a family far too rich to care who came or went. She never imagined accepting a job like this, taking care of the home of a man who didn't even see his staff. But the pay was good. 3 months would cover half her mother's hospital debt. Grace pushed open the rusted gate and stepped onto the covered porch. She knocked once, then again. When no one answered, she turned the knob. Unlocked. "Hello?" she called, stepping timidly into the dark hallway. Nothing. Only the echo of her voice and the ticking of an old clock. Then she heard it, muffled, dragging, coming from upstairs. A hoarse groan, the slow scrape of something, or someone, across the wooden floor. "Is someone there?" she asked louder, her stomach knotting. She climbed the stairs slowly. Each creak felt like a warning, but she wasn't one to flee easily. At the end of the hallway, a partially open door spilled warm lamplight into the dark. Grace took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and froze. There, sitting in a wheelchair, his face turned toward the window, was Logan Whitmore, the man she'd been hired not to see, not to touch, not to disturb. He was exactly as rumored, imposing even while seated, a sharp jawline, steel-cold eyes, dark brown hair tousled just enough, and his arms, strong but marked by wounds and scars. "You're not the nurse," he said without looking at her. Grace swallowed. "I'm Grace. I came to take care of the house." He let out a dry laugh, almost a breath. "Housekeeping? Great, because the last caregiver decided she'd rather serve coffee than bathe me." Grace stood frozen. "So, if you don't want to be part of the stats of workers who quit the first week, help me. I need a bath." She blinked, stunned. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm not a nurse. I just clean. And I just breathe with effort, live with pain, and can't even get a damn shirt on without help. Yet here we are." He finally turned his face, grey eyes locking onto hers. "Going to run like the others?" Grace drew in a breath, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. This was madness. She wasn't paid to touch him. But something in his eyes, pain hidden behind arrogance, anger bordering on loneliness, it rooted her in place. I can try to help, just for today," she said, her voice steadier than expected. His lips curved in something not quite a smile. "Bathroom's right there. And yes, you'll have to take off my shirt." Grace followed behind the wheelchair, her heart pounding louder than ever. In the marble and mirror bathroom, she fumbled with the towels, the stool, and simply avoiding looking at the broad chest he exposed while lifting his arms with effort. "You're not going to faint, are you?" he teased, eyes narrowing. She didn't answer. In silence, she turned on the water and helped him up, her hands trembling as his muscles quivered under her touch. When the hot water hit him, Logan let out a deep breath that made her shiver. Grace bit her lower lip. This wasn't right. She was just the cleaner. But he was a shattered man who, for one moment, seemed less like an arrogant recluse and more human. "Grace," he said, voice hoarse and damp with steam. She looked up, heart racing. "Stay, just for now." And against all logic, she stayed. Water streamed down his body, tracing every contour of skin marked by the accident. Grace tried to keep her eyes on her hands, one on his shoulder, the other holding the sponge, but it was impossible not to notice. Logan Whitmore wasn't just a wounded soul with a sharp tongue. He was, despite everything, devastatingly attractive. She had never seen a body so strong and so vulnerable at the same time, and that confused her more than it should. "You're shaking," he said, voice barely a whisper under the stream. "It's the hot water," she lied, looking away. He turned slightly toward her, eyes locked. "Or is it the touch?" Grace felt her cheeks flush but didn't reply. The line between care and intimacy had blurred the moment she pulled off his shirt. And now, in that steamy atmosphere filled with nothing but water and racing hearts, everything seemed ready to break. "I'm done," she said quickly, pulling back. "I'll get a towel." He gave a subtle nod, allowing her to wrap him in a thick white towel. When she tried to help him sit back in the wheelchair, he let her guide him without protest. For a moment, arrogance was replaced by a strange quiet, something like gratitude, but deeper. Grace wheeled him back to the bedroom and helped him into a loose t-shirt and sweatpants. Silence hung between them, heavy, 1,000 unsaid words floating in the air. When she finished, she walked to the door, ready to return to her original job, cleaning the house, far from him, far from the confusion he stirred inside her. "Grace." His voice stopped her. She turned, trying not to show what she felt. "You didn't ask about the accident." She looked at him. "I figured you didn't want to talk." Logan looked away for a moment, then back at her. "I don't. But maybe, with you, it's different." Her breath faltered. "Why?" "Because you don't treat me like I'm broken, or a monster." Grace bit her lip, unsure how to respond. "My car flipped near my family's ranch. I was alone. The cops said it was a miracle I survived." He paused, eyes dark. "I was trapped for hours. Couldn't scream. Didn't know if anyone would come." She stepped closer, slowly. This wasn't in the job description, but she knew the contract no longer mattered. "Were you scared?" she asked softly. He let out a bitter laugh. "I don't feel fear, Grace. I am fear." She looked down, something tightening inside her. "That's not true. You barely know me. Maybe, but I know the man in that bathroom today wasn't a monster. He was just broken." Logan looked at her with a mix of surprise and something she couldn't name. Then he turned away, eyes on the window. "You leaving tomorrow?" he asked suddenly. Grace hesitated. "If you want me to stay, I'll stay." Silence. "I want you to." She nodded, without a smile. Something inside her already knew. She wouldn't be able to leave, not yet, even if everything here was out of place. "Good night, Mr. Whitmore." "Logan." She paused at the door. "What?" "My name's Logan, you can call me that." Grace felt a chill run down her spine. Something had shifted in that room. An invisible thread now connected them, and it wasn't just empathy. It was something more dangerous, more intense. That night, as she put away the cleaning supplies in the laundry room, Grace could barely breathe. The scent of his soap still clung to her hands, and every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the heat of the water, the feel of his skin beneath her fingers. The next morning, she woke before sunrise and decided to clean the office, the only room he had asked not to be disturbed. But when she opened the door, she froze. On the desk sat a photo of him with a blonde woman in his arms, smiling, alive, and beside it a torn marriage contract. The torn paper trembled in Grace's hands. The yellowed edges of the document revealed it hadn't been destroyed long ago. The name Logan Whitmore was printed in elegant letters above a blank space where a woman's signature should have been. The same woman who smiled in the photo beside it, framed in thick glass. Tall, blonde, light eyes, and a bridal smile. She leaned against Logan's chest like she belonged there, like the man Grace knew now, lonely, shattered, had once belonged to someone, and maybe still did. Grace didn't know why it hurt, but it did, more than it should have. "Who let you in here?" The sharp voice made her spin around. Logan stood at the door, hands on the frame, breathless, eyes hard. I was just cleaning. The door was ajar and you decided to snoop." He took a few steps forward, limping slightly. "You pretend to be naive, but you're not." Grace snapped the picture frame shut with a dry click. "I wasn't snooping, but you should lock it if you don't want people to see." Logan came closer, and for a moment she thought he would yell, but he didn't. The anger in his eyes was laced with something else. Pain, a dark abyss he didn't want anyone to touch. "She left a week before the wedding," he said suddenly, voice low and rough. "Said she didn't want to live with a man who treated people like objects, that everything in me was about control, rigidity, coldness, that I didn't know how to love." Grace swallowed. Was she wrong? His eyes narrowed, and for a moment she thought he'd shut down again, but then something inside him gave way. Maybe she was right. Silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of the wind outside. Grace took a step forward, challenging the invisible boundary between them. "And now, are you still like that?" Logan sighed, leaning on the edge of the desk. "I don't know. Since the accident, everything feels out of control. And you showed up in the middle of that chaos." She looked away, confused. "I just came to take care of the house." "But you're taking care of me." The words hung in the air like a spark ready to ignite. Grace couldn't pretend anymore that this was just a job. Every touch, every conversation, every glance, the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, the way the air changed when they were alone. She wanted to deny it, say it was just empathy, but when his eyes met hers again, dark, intense, she knew it wasn't empathy. It was desire, forbidden, impossible, overwhelming. "I need to keep cleaning," she whispered, trying to leave the room. But before she reached the door, he caught her wrist. The touch wasn't rough. It was urgent, human. "Grace." She turned slowly, heart pounding so loudly she could almost hear it. "You shouldn't be here." She hesitated. "Do you want me to leave?" He took a long moment. "I want you to stay, but I don't know what that will do to you." She gave a dry smile. "I think it already did, and I didn't even notice when it started." Logan slowly let go of her wrist, but his eyes remained locked on hers. "If you stay, you'll cross a line you can't uncross." Grace stepped back, lips parted. She didn't say anything, but she didn't leave. Later that night, while preparing dinner, her thoughts spun endlessly. The woman in the photo, the torn contract, the fragility hidden behind Logan's arrogance, and the truth she didn't want to admit. She was falling for him. When it was time to serve him, she found him sitting in the living room, staring into the fire. The golden glow lit his face in a way that felt almost unreal. When she set the tray on the table, he looked up. "Grace." She turned, already sensing something different was coming. "If I tell you that you make me feel things I thought I'd lost, will you run?" She paused for a second, heart racing, then slowly walked over, kneeling in front of him. "I won't run, Logan, but don't ask me to give myself to you without knowing you'll stay." He looked at her, surprised by her boldness, and then, without warning, his hand touched her face, warm, firm, full of a longing that tore straight through her soul. But he didn't kiss her, not yet, because in that moment desire was more dangerous than touch. The warmth of the fireplace still burned on Grace's skin as she pulled away from Logan, his handprint lingering on her cheek like an invisible tattoo. There was no kiss, but the almost weighed more than any real contact. She rose slowly, heart pounding. He said nothing more, just watched her as she collected the tray with trembling hands and slipped into the kitchen like a shadow running from its own reflection. In the middle of the night, insomnia took hold. Lying in the small back room, blankets clutched around her, Grace replayed every moment. Logan's gaze, his quiet confession, the hesitant touch, and her own response. Bold, but honest. She was in too deep. Worse, she was starting to want to be. The next morning, she decided to avoid him. She needed distance, even if just for a few hours. She spent the day in the back garden, clearing dry leaves, turning the dirt in the abandoned greenhouse. She needed to get her hands dirty with something other than him. But at 4 in the afternoon, one of Logan's wheelchair wheels appeared on the porch. "So now you're running from me?" She looked up, surprised. He rarely left the house, and never alone. "I'm just trying to keep my head on straight." Logan watched her for a moment. He wore a plain black shirt and a blanket over his legs. Still, his gaze wore power. "Mine went straight to hell that night by the fire." Grace dropped her gaze, digging into the soil. "I can't get involved with you. I can't lose myself in this." "This, meaning me?" She hesitated, then nodded. He wheeled closer, pushing with effort. "Grace, if I said I don't want to hurt you, would you believe me?" She looked up slowly. "Wanting doesn't mean you won't." Logan took a deep breath. You're right." Silence. Then he pulled something from his pocket, an old gold brooch with a red stone in the center, worn, but still beautiful. "My mum used to wear this when she came out to the greenhouse. Planting helped her forget the world. And my father." Grace took the brooch gently, moved by his confession. "You hated your father?" she asked quietly. Logan stared out at the horizon. He believed a man was only a man if he was feared. He never knew love or kindness. But my mum, she was the opposite, strong in her silence. She taught me that strength can look like tenderness. Grace closed her fingers around the brooch. "I think she'd be glad to know that deep down you learned." Logan looked at her, and for a moment the arrogant man was gone, replaced by a lost boy. "That's why you throw me off, Grace, because you remind me of her. Not in looks, but in the way you see the world." She stood slowly, wiping her hands on her jeans. They stood face to face, separated only by a thin emotional boundary. "Logan, you're still trapped in what you lost. And I'm not the woman in the photo." He reached out, gently brushing her fingers. "I know, and that's exactly what scares me." Grace blinked, feeling heat rise in her eyes. She wanted to hate him, wanted to walk away. But how do you hate someone who's finally showing their cracks? "Then let's make a deal," she said, stepping back slightly, but keeping her hand in his. "I won't run, but you don't lie to me and don't hide. Not even try to buy you." "Especially that," Logan smiled faintly, the first genuine smile. "Deal." As she turned to head back to the house, he called her. "Grace." She stopped. "You're the first light that's entered this place in a long time." She swallowed hard and went inside without looking back. But the next night, something unexpected happened. As she was collecting the clothes from the line, she heard tires on the gravel driveway. A black car, sleek and quiet, slowly pulled up in front of the mansion. Out stepped a tall woman in a tight dress and high heels, blonde, striking, with a gaze sharp as a blade, the same woman from the photo. She walked to the front door with a dangerous smile on her lips. "Good evening. I'm here to see Logan." Grace felt the world spin. Grace didn't know how she managed to open the door. Her hands were trembling, and the air felt heavier than the bricks of the house. But there she was, in the flesh, wearing expensive perfume, the woman from the photo, the ghost of Logan's past, now alive and smiling with confidence. "Good evening," the blonde said, removing her sunglasses and revealing eyes as cold as ice. "I'm Cassandra." Grace swallowed hard, but stood her ground. "He wasn't expecting visitors. He never is. But I usually come in anyway." Cassandra gave a half smile and walked past Grace without asking permission. For a second, Grace considered stopping her. But something in the way Cassandra walked, assured, purposeful, like she still owned the place, made her hesitate. By the time Grace closed the door, it was too late. Cassandra was already walking down the hall like someone returning home. Logan was in the living room, reclined in a chair facing the fireplace, his face still marked by the accident, but his posture as firm as ever. When he heard heels echoing across the wooden floor, he turned slowly and froze. "Cass," he whispered, stunned. "Hello, darling." She leaned in and, before he could react, kissed his cheek with the intimacy of someone who had once had all of him. Grace stood at the edge of the room, her chest tightening. Logan pulled away, his expression cold. "What are you doing here?" "I heard about the accident. I thought I should see it for myself." She smiled, but there was poison behind that smile. "You vanished. Even your lawyers stopped responding." "Because there's nothing left for us to discuss." Cassandra ignored the coldness in his voice and ran her fingers through her smooth hair with feigned indifference. "You know I regret it, Logan." He raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "I left because I was scared. The wedding, the control, your way of silencing the world with a look. But when I found out you were like this, hurt, vulnerable." She looked into his eyes. "I realized I still care." Grace's stomach churned. Cassandra was everything she wasn't, sophisticated, bold, unshakable. And standing there in front of Logan, she seemed to know exactly how to break through each of his defenses. "You left me when I needed you the most," Logan said, voice low but sharp. "And now you want, what? Redemption." "I want you back," she answered without hesitation. Silence. Grace couldn't stand there any longer. "I'll go upstairs, let you talk." Before Logan could reply, she disappeared up the stairs, heart pounding. In the guest room, she threw herself onto the bed and buried her face in the pillow. She felt foolish, naive. For a moment, she had believed something real could exist between her and Logan. But now it was clear he belonged to another world, a world of women like Cassandra. Minutes later, she heard soft, cautious footsteps in the hallway. Logan entered slowly. "She's gone." Grace didn't respond. She turned her face toward the window. "She doesn't mean anything to me anymore. She meant something once, and maybe she still does." "That's not true." He came closer, kneeling beside the bed. "You didn't see what I saw, didn't hear how she spoke. Everything about her is surface level. She didn't come back for me. She came back for control." Grace slowly turned to face him, eyes watery. "And are you sure you don't want that back?" Logan ran a hand over his face, exhausted. "Grace, I feel like a different man since the accident, and even more so since you walked into this house." She swallowed hard. But that doesn't change the fact that you still belong to a world I don't know. I don't belong to anything, Grace. Not even to myself sometimes. For a moment she saw the man he had become. Not the arrogant millionaire, but someone trying to rebuild. And even though her mind screamed for her to run, her heart was too involved to listen. She leaned in slowly and touched his face with trembling fingers. I don't want to be your bandage, Logan, or your distraction. And I don't want to be your punishment, Grace. I just want a chance to be different. She looked into his eyes, and then, finally, the kiss that hadn't happened by the fireplace came with all the force they'd held back. There was no room for doubt, no apologies. It was as if the world around them disappeared. Cassandra, the past, the fear. But when their lips parted, breathless, he whispered something that made her shiver. If she comes back, I'll need you to trust me. The sentence hung in the air like thick smoke. If she comes back, I'll need you to trust me. Grace pulled slightly away from the kiss, her lips still tingling, her heartbeat so fast it felt like it would escape her chest. His mouth, warm and firm, was still inches from hers, but it wasn't her body spinning. It was her mind. Trust is something that's built, Logan, she whispered, and so far you've only given me reasons to doubt. He nodded slowly, with a look more vulnerable than she'd ever seen on him. I know, but I can't promise Cassandra won't try to come back. What I can promise is that she's not who I want. Grace wanted to believe that, wanted to dive into that promise and let herself drown. But Cassandra's shadow was too big. She had returned with hurricane force and left the doors of doubt wide open. Even so, in that moment, Grace didn't pull away. She simply lay beside him in the narrow bed and let silence speak for them. Logan didn't try anything more. He just held her hand, as if that contact was the anchor he needed to keep from sinking. The next morning, she woke up alone. Logan wasn't in the room or the hallway. Worried, she went down quickly, crossed the kitchen, and found him on the back terrace. He was alone, a blanket over his legs and a cup of coffee in his hands, eyes lost on the horizon. "You're up early," she said, approaching. "Barely slept." He turned to her. "I kept wondering if I made a mistake pulling you into this." Grace sat beside him, the morning air still damp with dew. "I'm already in it, Logan. There's no pretending otherwise." He gave a faint smile, but pain still lingered in his eyes. "You don't know Cassandra like I do. She doesn't accept losing. She hates feeling replaced. So she's going to try and take something from you. No, she's going to try and take you from me." Grace squeezed his fingers. "She can try, but she doesn't get to decide for me." The rest of the day passed too calmly, like the quiet before the storm. Logan spent part of the afternoon going through old paperwork in the office, while Grace cleaned the upper floor, trying not to think about the ice-eyed blonde. But as night fell, while she was preparing dinner, the landline rang. An old, forgotten sound that echoed through the hallways like a warning. Grace picked it up, already bracing for the worst. "Good evening, darling. It's Cassandra." Her blood ran cold. "What do you want?" "Just to talk, woman to woman." Her voice was soft, but laced with venom. "Can we meet tomorrow? At the cafe on the corner of Cedar Street, the one with the red tables?" Grace hesitated. "Does Logan know you're calling?" "If he does, he might not let me talk, and I need to tell you a few truths before you get hurt more than you already are. Why would I trust you?" "Because, darling, who knows the wolf better than the woman who was devoured by him?" Grace hung up without replying, but the sentence stayed etched in her mind. That night, she didn't say a word to Logan. He seemed too calm, and she, far too unsettled. She spent hours lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, until she decided. The next morning, she left a note on the kitchen counter and slipped out quietly. The cafe on Cedar Street was discreet and cozy. The red tables, just as Cassandra had described, were mostly empty, except for one, where the blonde waited with a cappuccino in her hands. "You came." Cassandra smiled, crossing her legs with elegance. "I was hoping you would. You seem curious." "Say what you came to say, quickly." Cassandra leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Logan is a storm, and storms aren't tamed with tenderness. I tried. I tried to love him, to shape him, to understand him, but in the end, he nearly destroyed me." Grace held her gaze. "You ran away before the wedding. That says a lot." "I ran to survive." She took a deep breath. "And now I'm back, to make sure you don't make the same mistake." "And what mistake is that?" Cassandra smiled, cruel. "Falling in love with a man who doesn't know what to do with love." Cassandra's words echoed like a curse. Falling in love with a man who doesn't know what to do with love. Grace left the cafe with hurried steps, her stomach in knots. She couldn't tell if it was anger, fear, or frustration. Maybe all three at once. Cassandra was manipulative, that was obvious. But what if, behind that calculated arrogance, she had actually told some truth? Back at the mansion, Logan was in the library, surrounded by old books he rarely read. When he heard the door open, he looked up, relieved. "You disappeared. I saw the note, but I was worried." Grace didn't respond right away. She looked at the man in front of her as if seeing him for the first time. The rigid jaw, the eyes worn with exhaustion, and that aura of control she had once found fascinating. But Cassandra had been right about one thing, that control could also be destructive. "I went to meet your ex-fiancé," she said bluntly. Logan froze for a second. The silence between them grew so heavy that Grace nearly regretted it. "You what?" "She called me, said she had truths to tell me, and I went to listen." Logan stood up with difficulty, leaning on the cane he now used to move short distances. "Grace, you shouldn't have done that." "Why?" "Because I might find out who you really are." Her voice rose, half a tone, trembling more with emotion than anger. He walked toward her slowly, his face tense. "Because Cassandra is dangerous. She twists everything to make herself the victim. She's always been that way. She said you tried to mold her, control her, that loving you was like being lost in a maze with no way out." Logan ran a hand through his hair, clearly battling something inside himself. "And you believed her?" "I don't know." Grace took a deep breath. "But I want to hear it from you. No masks, no games. Who are you, Logan Whitmore? And why should I trust my heart to someone who already made another woman run from the altar?" Logan stepped back. That wasn't just a question, it was a blow to the chest. He walked to the window, eyes lost in the trees, swaying with the wind. "My father cheated on my mother all his life. She knew but never left him. She thought love meant enduring. And I grew up swearing I'd never let anyone destroy me like that." Grace stayed silent, absorbing every word. "Cassandra wasn't my first attempt, but she was the most serious. I wanted to build a life with her. I made plans, set rules, imposed routines. I thought if I kept everything under control, there'd be no room for pain. And what happened? She called me a tyrant, said I confused love with possession, that I turned marriage into a soulless contract." He turned to Grace, his eyes glassy, but not weak. "She was right. I was like that. I didn't know how to love, only how to command." Grace stepped closer. "And now, have you changed?" "Since the accident, I've been trying, not because I became physically limited, but because being so close to death showed me how empty I was. Alone. Cold." He reached out and touched her hand. "But you made me feel something else, something I never knew how to name. She swallowed hard, letting his fingers intertwine with hers. "I don't want to be just another attempt, Logan. Another woman you try to fit into your emotional framework. You're not. You're the first woman who unravels me without saying a word." She wanted to believe him, and deep down, she already did. But fear still lived inside her like a shadow behind the door. "Then prove it. Tell me something you've never told anyone." He hesitated for a second, then sat on the couch beside her, eyes locked on hers. "After the accident, I thought about giving up." Grace's eyes widened. "I fired all the staff, went days without eating, just waiting for time to pass, until you arrived. The girl hired to clean the house, and without knowing, you washed my soul along with my body." Tears welled in her eyes. "You brought me back to life, Grace. I can't lose that. I can't lose you." She hugged him, not as someone comforting, but as someone choosing to stay. But outside the house, inside a black car parked across the road, Cassandra watched it all with a cold smile. And in her hands, she held something, an old but authentic copy of a will. Cassandra watched the mansion with narrowed eyes, like a hunter who knows every corner of her prey. The will rested on her lap, folded with surgical precision. It was old, dated nearly 10 years ago, but still valid. It named Logan Whitmore as the sole heir, under one condition: he had to marry before turning 35, or the entire family empire would go to a charity chosen by his grandfather. And Logan, now 34, was dangerously close to the deadline. Cassandra smiled. "You pushed me away, Logan, but you forgot legal promises don't disappear with accidents." Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Grace was preparing a tray of tea, trying to process everything she had just heard. Logan's confession about nearly giving up had shaken her deeply, but it also scared her. It was as if she had become the anchor of a man still drifting between redemption and the abyss. She returned to the living room and found him reading, or at least pretending to. "Trying to distract yourself?" she asked, setting the tray on the table. "Or trying not to overthink," he replied without looking up. "But when you walk into the room, that becomes impossible." Grace smiled faintly, but then sat beside him, seriousness in her eyes. "I've thought a lot, Logan. And if we're going to try this, it has to be with honesty, complete openness. If there are more secrets, I won't be able to take it." He looked at her for a long moment, then closed the book. "There is one thing, something that might change everything." Grace's stomach twisted. "Tell me." "My grandfather was a rigid, controlling man. He left a clause in his will, stating that to keep the inheritance, I had to marry before I turned 35, not for love, just for image." She stared at him, stunned. "Are you saying that if you don't get married, you lose everything?" He nodded. "Everything. The company, the properties, the mansion." And Cassandra knew. Of course. That's why the engagement started, but it's also why she left. When she realized she didn't want to be part of a game, she walked away. But now, he sighed, she's back, and she probably knows the deadline is near. Grace stood and paced the room. Now I understand. Her fear that I'd get hurt. It wasn't about me, Logan. It was about what she might lose. "Yes," he said, voice steady. "And that's why I need you, not as a solution, but as someone I can trust." Grace stopped and looked at him. "Are you asking me to marry you?" He stood with effort until he was face to face with her. "Not now, but yes, I'm asking you to think about it, as a possibility, as a chance, to protect what's mine, but also to build something real if you want to." Grace felt the world spin. Marriage, a contract, or a true commitment. But before she could respond, the doorbell echoed through the house. They looked at each other. Logan narrowed his eyes, already expecting the worst. Grace went to the door, and there she was. Cassandra, elegant as always, but with a triumphant gleam in her eyes. "Good evening," she said, handing an envelope to Grace. "I thought you two would want to see this together." Grace opened it right there, her hands trembling before even knowing why. Inside, the will and the clause, clear as day. "You have until the 12th of next month to marry, Logan, or you lose everything." "This doesn't change anything," he said firmly. "Doesn't it?" Cassandra raised an eyebrow. "Then why is she pale as a ghost?" Grace clutched the document to her chest. "You did this to push me away." "No, darling. I did this to open your eyes. He might feel something for you now, but after the wedding, once everything's secured, will you still be needed?" Logan stepped forward. "That's enough, Cassandra." She smiled, poisonous. "You're right, Logan. Enough indeed. Enough pretending this is a fairy tale. This is a game, and those who don't know how to play, lose." She turned and walked away, leaving behind a silence that cut like glass. Grace took a deep breath, her heart in pieces. "And tell me, Logan," she whispered without looking at him, "if I weren't the solution, would you still choose me?" The question hung between them like a suspended blade, ready to cut through what little balance remained in their fragile relationship. Logan didn't respond immediately, and the silence hurt more than any word could have. Grace waited. 1 second, 2, 3. Nothing. Then she stepped back, like someone realizing they had walked into a fire and now needed to get out before it was too late. "You hesitated, Logan." Her voice was low but steady. "And sometimes silence speaks louder than a lie." "Grace, that's not what—" "It's exactly what it is." She gave a wounded half-smile. "You brought me here, let me break through your walls. But deep down, you're still clinging to what you need, not what you want." Logan stepped forward, limping. "I want you. I feel something for you I've never felt for anyone. But you need a wife to keep your inheritance, and that's what breaks me, not knowing if I'm the woman or just the solution." She turned quickly and ran up the stairs, leaving Logan alone, his heart sinking in his chest. He heard the slam of the bedroom door, and then the sound of a suitcase being dragged. Grace stuffed clothes into her backpack without thinking. She needed to get out, to breathe, to pull herself away before she drowned in a sea that was never hers. She couldn't be just another piece in his game. Not after everything. Descending quickly, she passed by Logan, still standing in the living room. He tried to grab her arm, but she pulled away. "Don't do this, Grace." She looked him in the eye. "You had your chance to answer, and you didn't. Because the question shattered me, not because I didn't have an answer." She didn't respond. She simply opened the door and walked out. The night air hit her face like a slap. The dark road ahead looked strangely welcoming. She walked aimlessly, eyes burning, chest on fire. But she didn't get far. First came the sound of the engine, then the headlights. Logan's car stopped beside her, kicking up dust. He got out with difficulty, leaning on his cane, not caring about the pain etched in every step. "You're just going to leave? Run away? Like Cassandra?" Grace turned on her heel, fists clenched. "Don't compare me to her." "Then don't act like her." She stepped closer, their faces inches apart. "You don't understand, Logan. I've spent my whole life being used. My dad left us. My mom was a housekeeper her entire life. And now, I thought someone finally saw me, really saw me. And I do." He cupped her face in his hands. "I hesitated because I'm terrified, because I know I could lose you, because what I feel for you doesn't even fit inside me anymore." She looked away, her throat tight. "That's not enough." "Then let me try. Let me prove to you that you're not part of the plan. You are the plan. Grace wanted to resist, wanted to shout that it wasn't enough. But his eyes, those devastated, sincere eyes, begging for more than words, shattered every last defense she had. "Take me home," she whispered, barely audible. Logan nodded, relieved, and led her to the car. Back at the mansion, he made her tea with his own hands, clumsy movements but full of intention. Then they sat on the couch, side by side, silent, present. "Grace," he said after a few minutes, "you asked if I'd still choose you if you weren't the solution. And the truth is, I already did, from the moment you gave me a bath in that damn bathroom full of steam." She laughed, tearful. "You saw me when I was invisible, touched me when I couldn't bear to be touched, challenged me when everyone else just obeyed. And if that's not love, then I don't know what is." Grace rested her head on his shoulder, finally feeling the world slow down. But as they shared that emotionally charged silence, the phone rang. Logan answered. His lawyer's voice came through the line, tense, urgent. "Logan, Cassandra filed a petition to invalidate your inheritance. She's claiming you left her for someone else, before the engagement was officially cancelled." Grace felt the blood drain from her body. The war had begun. The phone still trembled in Logan's hand when he hung up. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any scream. Grace stood frozen, like the ground was vanishing beneath her feet. "She filed the petition?" she asked, her voice low. Logan nodded. "She's saying I abandoned her to be with you, before the engagement was officially over." Grace felt a weight crush her chest. "Could that work?" "It depends. The will is clear, but Cassandra knows how to manipulate judges. She knows the loopholes. And more than that, she knows my weaknesses." Grace crossed her arms, stepping back. "So what are you going to do?" "I'm going to fight," he said without hesitation. "But if this hurts you, if you get dragged into this because of my past, She raised her hand, stopping him. "No, you're not pushing me away now." Logan stared at her, confused. "I stayed, even when you hesitated, even when I wanted to run. And now that everything's coming to the surface, you want to protect me again with distance." She shook her head. "No. If we're going to fight, we fight together." He stepped closer, cupping her face. "I don't deserve you." "This isn't about deserving. It's about loving. And I love you, Logan Whitmore. Even with your scars, even with your messy past, even if it all ends in dust." He pulled her into his arms, their lips meeting in a kiss that wasn't about desire or urgency. It was a silent vow. The next morning, the hearing was hastily scheduled. The Dallas courtroom was cold, impersonal, like every place where money spoke louder than feelings. Cassandra was there, impeccable in her white suit, like a widow mourning something she never lost. Her lawyer was overly confident, but Logan was different, calm, steady. And beside him, sitting with her head held high, was Grace. During her testimony, Cassandra painted a meticulous picture. A sudden engagement driven by financial interest, a breakup caused by a third party, and an inheritance that, according to her, was obtained in bad faith. But when it was Logan's turn to speak, the courtroom fell silent. For a long time, I was a man who confused control with care, power with protection, and because of that, I lost people. I lost myself. He looked at Grace. "But this accident, this woman, made me realize that love isn't about control. It's about choice. And I chose to love, not for the inheritance, not out of obligation, but because for the first time in my life, someone truly saw me." Cassandra scoffed, but the judge gestured for her to be quiet. "That marriage clause should never have been written," Logan continued. "But if you decide that I've lost everything because I found real love outside of a contract, then I accept that. Because I've already gained more than any will could give me. A deep silence followed. Hours later, the decision was read. The judge dismissed Cassandra's petition. He cited bad faith and an attempt at judicial manipulation. The marriage clause remained, but in recognition of Logan's personal transformation and the absence of any contractual tie between him and Grace when their relationship began, the court upheld his inheritance. Outside, Cassandra passed them with her face pale with rage. "You'll regret this, Logan. You'll miss what you lost." He met her eyes. "I lost you, Cassandra, and that was my greatest freedom." In the car, Logan took Grace's hand. "I don't want to wait for another clause or another obstacle." "What are you saying?" He turned to her, gaze unwavering. "Marry me." Grace laughed, surprised. "Now it's for love or legal deadline." He smiled. "It's for me. For us. Because I want to wake up every day next to the woman who saved me. Without even trying." She bit her lip, moved. "Didn't you save me too?" "Maybe. But if we're going to save each other, let's do it together." She nodded, eyes full of tears. "Then yes, Logan, I do." Months later, the once-closed mansion was adorned with golden lights. Friends, few but true, gathered in the garden where Logan and Grace said their vows. No clauses, no inheritances, no wills, just love, real, chosen, and finally, free. 2 years later. The Whitmore mansion was no longer so quiet. The once neglected garden now bloomed with vibrant colors: hydrangeas, lavender, tomatoes, and hand-tended herbs. At its center, a small glass greenhouse shimmered under the morning sun. Inside, Grace, wearing a light dress and her hair tied up in a messy bun, gently watered the seedlings. Beside her, a little girl with curly brown hair tried to mimic her mother's movements with a toy watering can. "Gently, Emily. The roots are still sensitive," Grace said with a smile. "Like Daddy was?" the little girl asked, her voice soft and curious. Grace laughed. "Yes, like Daddy, but now he's strong." As if summoned, Logan appeared at the greenhouse door, leaning against the frame, cane in hand, more out of habit than necessity. His healed body still bore scars, but his eyes were more alive than ever. "Are you playing farm without me already?" he teased. Emily ran to him, and Logan lifted her with a small effort, kissing her cheek tenderly. "She's already better than me at gardening," Grace said, walking over. "She has your soul," Logan replied, wrapping his arms around both of them. There was peace there, not the peace of those who've never faced storms, but the peace of those who've survived them all, and chose to stay. On the greenhouse wall, hanging like a keepsake, was Logan's mother's old brooch, now framed with dried flowers, and a small wooden plaque that read, "Strong roots, love without a contract." There, among plants and soil, between calloused hands and surrendered hearts, the man who was once cold, arrogant, and lost found home, and the woman who once thought she was just the housekeeper became everything. Thank you for coming here and watching my story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more stories like this one. Oh, and please leave a like. That helps our channel grow and reach even more people who love stories like these. The next story is already popping up on your screen, full of drama and passion that will stir your heart again. Stay with me and let's dive into this next story together. See you soon, my dear friends. Until the next video.